see who he was, rather than uh, becoming a doctor because the head of the boarding
Woman come back
school
there, or you don't?
took
Okay.
care of him,
Okay.
and encourage. There's that great scene at the end where she says, "Well, he's not going to medical school because he's an artist," and the son gets pissed at her and apologizes, and goes to medical school, and you see him doodling faces and anatomy in his uh, artistic versions of the anatomy in the medical books. And there's a very interesting montage at the back end where he flashes back on those moments that we've seen him go through with, especially with the carpenter building the house. And it's rare that she's the major character, so shouldn't all the flashbacks be about her? But they fit perfectly with this, and we've seen it, and not realizing how important they would be to him later in life. And we were charmed by the building of the house and the carpenter spending time with him. There are all these little moments that are very satisfying to see. And, this is a different kind of film. It doesn't shout it from the treetops, I'm important. It just is what it is. And I think occasionally we've seen, now I have to go over our list, but to compare it to some we've seen. But it's like there's a place for films like this. Now they have a hard time getting financed and getting made and getting sold and getting seen. So that's one of the reasons why um, uh, none of us heard about this. I don't know how we discovered it. It may have just hit Amazon, but Fern and I both saw it online somehow. And what is this film? Who never heard of it before? And it's 14 years old. Um, so these films are like rare and hard to see. Like, oh, I know one that we saw about the Canadian uh, Middle Eastern guy who teaches school in Canada, and the teacher commits
The
suicide.
teacher's lounge, is that the teacher's
No,
lounge?
no, no, that's a different one. Teacher's Lounge is also
Oh,
one
good.
of these films. That
Yeah,
was that was
yeah.
called Mr. Not Hokel, but Mr. Hana. He had
Yeah,
a
I
Middle
saw it too.
Eastern.
I can't remember. I was going to say that this film is really about multicultural relationships and how uh, there is love and yet misunderstanding. And I had a multicultural marriage. My husband
Uh-huh.
was from India,
Uh-huh.
and we were married 54 years before he passed, and it was uh, I could really relate to the relationship between the husband and the wife, and I feel like she loved him in a truer sense than he loved her. I mean, he was fascinated by her. He had passion for her initially, but I don't think he really loved her in the sense of loving all of her and her culture and everything that way.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because he couldn't, right? As much an artist as he was himself, he was a traditional Japanese gentleman. And I got the sense that he clawed his way up from obscurity. She edited his first or second book with him, third book, but first published in America. And so sometimes uh, the new young rebels, as they rise, become very traditional because that's what they came out of. You become your father. You know, when I was leaving Cleveland to go to film school in LA, he sat across the table from me and he said, "Why don't you get married and stop all this movie nonsense?" And I chuckled. And because in his mind, getting married solves a lot of problems, very traditional Jewish point of view. That was certainly his experience, having been born in 1915 and come to this country in 1920 and married my mother in 1941. Um, uh, that all made sense to him. That design for a life was the way it should be. And of course, my mother was a school teacher, which is what women were allowed to do back in the 30s, and was a very bright woman and had to go after I went off to school. She went back and got a master's in library science and became a catalog librarian. And it's like it took her that long to realize herself She'd always loved books, and she loved biology, and she was at the medical school at Case Western Reserve. So she found some closure in doing something finally that she loved that wasn't family related. Still very devoted to us and to my father, but people come around to it in certain ways. And what struck me about Leonie was that she didn't claim ownership in her son. She just made sure he didn't forget that he was his own person. And there's this wonderful set of lines that we're going to the end so soon. At the end, where she walks in this field and said, "I'm from Maine, and I'm okay because my children are their own person." Right. And they will, my children stand on their own. So I have reclaimed my own life.
It's interesting that you brought that up because basically she was always a rebel and wanted to live her own life.
Yeah.
And, so she passed that on to her children, but her whole way of being was that she wanted to be her own person,
Mhm.
didn't want to be dictated to about how she should live. And even when she was in Japan, she struggled with trying to fit into the life that people wanted her to live. And even the Japanese people who wound up loving her, actually, um, they warned her about, stepping out of the tradition, and she always struggled with that and wanted to be her own person and
Yeah.
do what she wanted.
It's like this friend from Bryn Mawr, Umeko, who has a school for girls, conservative families. They'd never let a divorced woman teach their kids. That wasn't clean enough. And who knows what evil things she did. Carol, go ahead. You're muted, Carol.
There we go. Um, I commenting on how rare it is to my experience, for parents, mothers, fathers, to break with the safe way, the predictable path, and say, as she did to a 10-year-old son, you don't have to go to school anymore. I recognize your talent. You build this house. I know of two composers. One was my late husband. I know of another one whose parents, in spite of not having extra money and having put both of their sons through the best musical preparation, composition, counterpoint, piano lessons, preparing for the concert hall to guarantee a profession around the age of 14 or 15, saying, you really don't want to play piano on the concert stage? And Jerry, my late husband, said, no, I want to write original dramatic scores for films. And another composer, I won't name his name, but he said, no, I want to have bands and write original music, and he became Hall of Famer, songwriter and composer. But they said, okay, and we'll get you the best. And they dropped the 6 hours a day practice at that young teenage and encouraged them and fostered their passion. I find it remarkable. It's rare. It's got to be rare.
Well, we tend to be helicopter parents and try and remove all obstacles from our kids and uh, give them everything they can so they can succeed as far as we can see what succeeding means. But it means different things to them. Martha, did you raise your hand? Yeah, you're muted. So unmute. There you go.
Yeah. Well, Leonie did say her mother also encouraged her
Yeah.
to be her own person, and that gave her a huge start, because I found it surprising that someone in this time, that a woman could be so much of, a free-spirited, independent person in everything she did, just even having a relationship with someone of another nationality or ethnicity was not accepted then.
Mhm.
I did want to throw in something just interesting that happened to me this week, which is a little bit related. I happened to have been reading a book for one of my book clubs, this week called The First Ladies, and it was about the very deep friendship and work that Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary, what was her name? Bethune, who was a Black activist, civil rights activist, and they became very good friends, which was unusual, and did a lot of work. And one of the things they really were pushing for was getting rid of lynching and getting
Yeah.
a bill passed. And one of the things they did was in 1935, they had 2 art shows in New York about lynching.
Yeah.
And the one by the NAACP, and they mentioned some of the artists, and I'm going, wait a minute, I know that name.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was Isamu Noguchi.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. What
I
was
looked
that
it up,
woman's
and I
name?
saw the picture. Pardon?
What was Eleanor's friend's name?
Mary McLeod Bethune. She was
Oh,
probably the best
Bethune. Okay.
black person in the United States, and she was, well known by, well, everybody, it seemed. And just for them to have it was about their relationship, which was incredible because white women and Black women wouldn't be even ever touch or eat together. But I'm saying this art show, and there it was, he was in it. And I just said, wait a minute, isn't that the same name? Because I was not familiar with his work. And it was an interesting picture I saw. It was one of the 2 anti-lynching art shows.
Mhm.
And when I looked it up, interestingly enough, one of the big universities had a retrospective this year of the 2 different art shows with all the lynching pictures.
Huh.
So I'm
Fabulous.
watching that as an aside because it was just a coincidence that in the same week, I'm watching the movie and reading this book.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I read The First Ladies also for my Memorial Library Book Club. And one of the things that I liked about the book was that it first told it from one person's point of view, then the next chapter was the next person's view, and like that. And I almost feel like this movie that we saw, Leonie, might have been very interesting if it wasn't sequential and it was told with different points of views and back and forth, so that we had an idea of what other people felt from their point of view as opposed to third person narrator. So
Well, but that was her, reading her letters and letters to her.
yeah.
That helped a lot. It's helped shape the film, but it wasn't absolutely necessary. I think even without the letters, we would have gotten the story. One thing about her mother, you have to remember, she was a plainswoman. She went across the country on her own as a single woman and homesteaded in Pasadena when it was nowhere. So that's courageous and independent and sort of a self-made person as well, as an example. And after she learns that her mother died, she makes that comment that, what she owes her mother.
And was it when her mother died? Can I jump in?
Yeah.
When her mother died, as was typical in the movie, and I really appreciated the movie, it's just that the magnitude of emotional response was minimized and flattened for the death, for someone jilting you and calling you a liar when you say you're pregnant. All these things I think would naturally warrant a greater emotional response than was depicted in the film. But when her mother died and she goes into the water and she's in a Christ figure formation, the arms are extended, she's in a cross. She's the Christ figure in the waters, which are usually a metaphor for birth, rebirth, baptism, other
Baptism, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I was trying to make sense of that. And out she comes after that one dip in the ocean, and then she's resuming her life.
It was her way of mourning, and coming to terms with the loss. And it wasn't made a big deal.
No.
That's who she was. She was so strong. She wasn't shaken by that. She was just moved. It's like James Bond, shaken, not stirred. She wasn't shaken. She was stirred by it.
Well, it's a style of minimal moments given to these huge moves in one's life, crises for most human beings. But it was the style in this filmmaking and you accept it. But it did stay with me, this Christ figure in the water. And then she comes out and she hugs her child and on she goes off the beach. And it's just one and done, you know.
Yeah.
with-
Well, it was a big story. Marina, you had something to add?
Yes, I had a similar thought about how Leonie and her lover, her husband, were both reacting to events in their lives. I think they were also kind of stiff. I didn't see emotion. I didn't see a lot of passion. I saw how he wanted her, but it was schematic to me. I didn't see chemistry between them. And the scene where Leonie is grieving her mother when she's in the water, I was even thinking, is she going to kind of try and drown herself?
Yeah,
And then
right.
she comes out and acts as if not much happened. So for me, while interesting, this film kind of lacked emotion. I also believe that the story, if you leave out the reality of the artist in it, the story is a reverse Madame Butterfly.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I've talked about this before about Asian filmmaking. The director and writer was Japanese, and I looked up his other films, and I didn't know any of the titles. He's only made about 4 other films. This was his most recent, I think. And there's a certain amount of emotional understatement that goes with Japanese culture. I'm not trying to profile Japanese people, but there is this understatement. Look at the austerity of Japanese script or Japanese design, as in Noguchi's own artwork. The history of Japanese art is extreme abstraction and minimal detail. It's almost like European minimalism. How big a story can you tell with the least number of strokes? What's the smallest thing you need to tell this story? So I didn't find it. I felt I knew what she was feeling in every scene. Part of it was performance, part of it was the dialogue, mostly through her actions. And I didn't feel wanting for knowing her, feeling that she was a sensitive woman. She just was, I don't know, there was this toughness to her that maybe that's what bothered you, that you wanted more overt warmth, more grief. It was weird too that they did, an American filmmaker would have made a big deal out of it. But the mother, she was only in that, in the early scenes in Pasadena and a couple of scenes, and she was quite a character. But she was like the lodestone. She showed Leonie what it takes to be a strong person, a strong woman. And then she became her own person, and she was strong in her own way. So I didn't find the film. Now, Yone was a typical male, excuse me. I'm a male, but I'm not typical. And uh, he was just smitten with her because she was another plaything. We learned that when he has another wife, and he says to her when she arrives in Japan, "Oh, it's customary here." He never thought of telling her. That's how old-fashioned he was. Whereas she, being a modern woman, and we should talk about the Bryn Mawr experience, and her friend Catherine. She was I don't want to say avant-garde. She was on the cutting edge. But if you remember that scene at Bryn Mawr with her friend, newfound friend Catherine Burrell, she says, "Please don't be boring with me, or ordinary. Don't be ordinary with me." So of course that just makes this other woman say, "Wow, this is a really interesting person. I've got to get to know." Because no woman ever said that. It means challenge me. Let's do something different. Let's not do what's expected of us. And so in a way, in those scenes, she was more a firebrand than she was, unless she was telling Yone off that uh, he's more my son than yours. and like I'm no longer your wife, he's no longer your son. Uh, it was like a lifelong effort, but she set herself in this kind of strong stone. Not that she was so stubborn, but she was resilient. And there was nothing life could throw at her that she couldn't respond to and make the most of it for herself. She's always saying, oh, and once again, we're on the move. Several times she says that. Carol, did you have something?
Yes, I don't want to
And then
let
Fern, next.
I don't want to let Yoni off so easily.
Okay.
Described at the beginning with their interaction and their collaboration, when he falls for her and she lets that happen, he says, "You are my Japan. You are beautiful like Japan. You are my Japan." So to then see a Yoni, a different Yoni, call her a liar when she says, "I'm pregnant with our child, please don't go," because the war had started, and I'm sure it was very confusing, to say the least. It didn't square with me. It wasn't convincing at all. This was the same man who was vulnerable to allow a woman, American or not, I mean, Caucasian, not Japanese or not, and suddenly becomes so hostile and
Well, his
it-
manhood was threatened. He saw she had sex with another man, and therefore
no,
was
this was from their apartment in
No,
New
with
York,
before
Lower East
that.
Side, when she was first pregnant, and
yeah.
he says, "I have to go home. The war has started. I'm not
Oh,
welcome."
that pregnancy. Okay.
And when he turns on
Yeah,
her
he turns
so
there too.
viciously,
Yeah.
and then it's a couple of years, not moments, where she is beckoned to come with the child back, and he's already has another wife. The coldness, the extreme change, I couldn't reconcile.
No, he was not that sympathetic throughout. He was just a constant obstacle for her to realize herself. Fern, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in terms of whether one liked her or not, what her character was like, she was a strong woman. And mainly both men and women in more traditional societies, including our own, don't really like strong women all that much. They have conversations, was Hillary likable or not? I mean, who has a conversation like that about a man who's that accomplished? Or we just a strong woman strikes us as somehow not motherly enough, not nurturing enough. Any of those things that made her remarkable are also off-putting, and probably off-putting to many of us who would like not to be put off by it, but it's culturally what we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay, I want to move, Cassandra, you've had your hand up, and then Arlene.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I was,
My own feeling about her was that the whole movie, the film, should have been called Courage because she was so courageous. After the mother died, it was as though she became that intense mother that she had had. Her mother said, "Go be strong," and then she instilled that into her son. She became her mother, and that is the easiest and healthiest way to mourn, is to incorporate those good qualities that you admire in the person who was lost.
Mhm.
Find that in spouses all the time. When the spouse dies and the widower takes on characteristics and becomes kind of the, the bivalent parent to the children who are left.
Good
So
point.
I think she was very strong, and that used her and wanted her to remain a muse, his muse, to inspire him and to serve that purpose of his poetry.
Well, he needed an editor.
Well,
Excuse me.
in the end, he attributed or dedicated his book to her, so that he, I think, legitimately felt he loved her. And he
Oh,
said,
in his mind, he felt, oh, this is legitimate love I have for her, and she's questioning.
yes, it's a legitimate
Yeah,
love, the sublimated love. He didn't, he wasn't interested in anything sexual after that one burst of lust that he had when they were writing and after that hand holding moment.
yeah.
Then he went back to a Japanese wife and a Japanese way of living and didn't touch her at all, wanted her to be walking behind him.
When
I
she
don't know
joins him, yeah, that's so
if that's
customary.
then. But he did dedicate the book to her. And
Right.
at the end, that did bring a smile to her face because
Yeah.
But what
Betty?
I
No,
wondered,
it's
yeah,
Arlene's turn.
was,
I think Arlene has been trying to speak.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren.
yeah,
Much of what I'd like to say has been said. I loved Leonie. I loved her independence. I thought she was a very strong, non-traditional person. And then I was shocked by the fact that she went to Japan probably without knowing the culture and much of the culture, because when they got together, he said to her in Japan, "You walk behind me."
Mhm.
And she was totally struck by that. She didn't expect that. And I was curious, why not? Because most people know that, or at least maybe didn't know
But
it
this was the early
in the
1900s.
1900s,
Right.
right? And then all of a sudden later on, she's pregnant again. That part I missed completely.
Well, you don't know who the father is, and she says, "What does it matter? It's my child."
Right,
And he gets angry again. He calls her a slut when he sees she's pregnant by somebody else.
right,
That's what I meant by his manhood is threatened.
right,
Even though they're totally separated, he's still laying a claim on her, like he can control her.
right.
Yeah. Betty?
yeah, I love the movie too. But I just wanted to say, and certainly I admired her independence and all that she did, or most of what she did. Um, but what was said about that he really loved her, that her husband loved her. I questioned that. Yeah, he did dedicate the book to her, but I really wondered, would he have become a famous poet? It seemed like they kept showing her editing. She was the editor and she was making all kinds of changes.
Yeah.
So, how much did she write and how much
Well,
did he write? Because she made a lot of changes. So, that was one thing. And then on a whole different topic, I wanted to mention, I think I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I don't know if people will agree with me on this, but I know we've talked about how she allowed her child, and he became, such a famous sculptor. And so obviously it really worked what she did, that she let him, miss school. But the reality is, supposing, for most people, if they thought, their child had a talent, and so they said, okay, you don't have to go to school, you can just pursue your art or whatever it is, and then maybe they had a talent, but they didn't really make it, people would see the parent as being very irresponsible for not allowing the child to have an education. So it's just kind of interesting that obviously it worked out and he became a famous
well,
sculptor. But, with for most people, if they tried something like that, it might not be
but,
so
but
successful.
she had no doubt that at his core he was an artist. So
Yeah.
it was an easy thing for her to commit herself to. She was so confident, even when he didn't really know it himself. She saw into him, and it took him a while to realize she was right about me.
Mm.
And that's what is remarkable about this film. She doesn't claim authorship for the boy, or the daughter. It's like they're not successful because of me, but I made sure they realized they could be successful on their own. She said they walk on their own, and therefore I've reclaimed my life. I don't have to shepherd after them. Fern?
I'm not sure that it mattered if he became successful or not. The success for her was allowing her child to be what
Good point.
he was. And the fact that he was successful was gravy. He was going to live the life that he could live authentically. And she lived authentically, and she wanted him to be able to do that. That is remarkable. It's very courageous. And that was one of many ways in which she was courageous. But that's what she saw as how she wanted to live and how she wanted her
Right.
to live.
You touched on it, authentic. Everybody should be their authentic selves. And that's why her reactions to other people seem to be a little insensitive, because that's just how she reacted to her mother, to Yone's infidelity, to him asking her back, giving him another chance, then walking away from him. These were things she just had to do. She had no problem making decisions for herself.
I love the kiss at the end that she
Oh.
did not give him.
Right. But that, I think, was told out of order. That was a great last scene. Because she had less gray hair at the end. She didn't look like she did when she was in Maine. So I think that was when she was leaving Japan,
I think
but still, it's a very telling scene. She was done. You can feel whatever you want to feel for me, but I don't feel that for you anymore. And I'm not going to fake it.
I want to say something about the biracial aspect of her children and how she was fiercely protective. Part of taking him out of school was that he was being bullied because he was biracial.
Well,
And
they were going to take him for World War I.
yeah, but also even
The Russo-Japanese War, rather.
Yeah, they may not have taken him because he was half American.
Well,
But
better to be proactive. That's
well, we interned our Japanese. I don't think they weren't sure about anyone's loyalty. But she, in a sense, did what parents do now.
just protective.
They homeschool their kids.
Yeah.
And she provided, as she said, the builders and the masons. And as a kid, I think there was enough proof that he'd be successful in that he'd, was the architect of this wonderful house.
Yeah. I want to bring up something.
Where he gave his mother the moon. I
Yeah.
mean, I thought that was a
It was a
beautiful
great house. With that round window framing Mount Fuji. That was a great.
Martha's trying to say.
I just wanted to mention this. I really loved the story and everything that was going on, the characters and all that. But could you say a little something about the cinematography? I was struck so many times by just a beautiful picture.
Yeah.
I thought it was terrific. I was not familiar with most of the people, the producer, any of the people actually.
I wasn't familiar with the cinematographer either.
But I thought it was beautiful. So many times I said, wow, look at that picture.
Simplicity is hard to achieve sometimes, beautiful simplicity. And that's what they did. None of the cinematography really called attention to itself, but there was a feeling there in all the scenes and the lighting and the composition and the movement. It all worked, so it's like the important thing is for the audience not to notice and be distracted by flashy craftsmanship. The word about editing is it's called the invisible art. You're not supposed to see it. And Carol, you'll appreciate this. It may have been Jerry, a film I did, and the producer of that went to a film that Jerry had scored, and he said, "Oh, I loved your score." And Jerry said, "Oh, I failed. You noticed." And that's that's the gold standard, is that the audience is so engaged, it's all an experience for them, and they're not analyzing it, they're experiencing it. And that's a very different kind of accomplishment.
That it enhances the storytelling.
Yeah.
Rather than be its own star.
No, it doesn't mean that the composer didn't please himself with the material, but you fit in with the
collaborative art.
Yeah, right? Very collaborative. Fern?
The quest for simplicity as the gold standard reminds me that I believe it was Mark Twain who said that he wrote such a long book because he didn't have time to write a short
Short
one.
one, yeah. It's hard. It's hard. In the beginning of my career, I made trailers, which were like anywhere from 90 seconds to 2 minutes long. How do you condense a 2 hour movie into 2 minutes? Well, you learn how to do it, and it's maybe it's not the most accurate picture, but that's advertising, so it's a little different. But the art of condensing and summarizing something it's quite an art in itself. But you're right, it's harder to write short. Less is more, and that's very hard to achieve. It's easy to spill, right? To do a stream of consciousness, but you have to have it make sense to the audience, and that's the artfulness.
It's interesting that you said that, because I know whenever the Academy Awards come out, one of the things I love to watch is the shorts, because they're so short, and they, the five nominees.
Oh,
for
you
the
see that
shorts.
program, because all the short subjects are compiled by the Academy into a theatrical experience. And they play at the Lemley Theater here in town. They play at the South Bay Film Society. Some of you may know that. And it's all the nominated shorts. And that can be as short as anything under 30 minutes.
Well,
And
that's what I was talking about.
yeah,
They usually only have it for,
short.
you have to catch it right at the right time, because it usually only plays for
A
1 or
week.
2 weeks.
Right.
And but they're always so clever and so good. The five that make it of,
Yeah.
in the
Well, it's
category.
very hard to do,
Yeah.
but these filmmakers have decided, I'm going to do something smaller so I can do it better. And that brings a clarity. This is minimalism. It brings a clarity to what they're trying to get across, because they just let the cream rise. I think David Bornstein has something to add. Where's your window, David?
Yeah, I'm hiding over here. Anyway, first of all, I wanted to say that I agree with the comments about cinematography. I think the cinematographer did quite a job, a very good job here.
Uh-huh.
Secondly, I sort of saw uh, Leonie
Yeah.
as almost like a hippie mom,
Yeah.
in the sense,
Before
oh, you're
time.
going to go right into art. You don't want to do these other things. I'm
Yeah.
taking you out of school. And then lastly, I it made me think about the movie we saw, Genius, where
Yeah,
you
right.
had an editor working with the author, and like who was really doing the writing in a sense. And it seemed, and I saw some of the same thing in this film, because I was looking when she was at the very beginning, when she was uh, editing it,
Yeah.
she was keeping the same emotion in it, but she was changing the words. And I couldn't quite tell. Said, boy, this really doesn't look like what he wrote. And it was very successful.
Yeah. Well, she kept
So,
the essence, and
yeah.
it was very interesting. Genius was a great film for us. And even uh, the editor says, we always wonder if we're really helping the artist. Or, was it meant to be changed? So are we putting too much of our own taste in it, or are we interpreting for the artist what they haven't been able to do for themselves? Granted, with Hemingway and Fitzgerald, he had, some top talent to mess with. And of course, Thomas Wolfe was, that 5,000 page book that was part of the back half of the film. That was really something to whittle down. So it depends on the assignment, but yeah, it's again, am I pulling the strings of the artist, pull the marionette strings, or am I controlling him, or am I letting his work, his intention control me? And it's an ever-present dilemma, but it was voiced very eloquently in Genius, and the performances there were just great, and we just all love that. I want to talk about the Bryn Mawr experience very early in the film. I don't know who the actor was who played her friend, Carol Burrell, but this woman who says nobody's ever spoken that way in a class before. We revere our professors, and you corrected him. We see her correct, she, oh no, it wasn't the man, it was his daughter or his wife of the same name who who was the great artist you referred to. Burnell was her name. But there's a scene much later when she's pregnant and she visits her and she says, "And how are you? You know, you're always talking about me." And she says, "Well, I have a great life. I want for nothing." And she gives her schedule. And of course, she spends no time with her husband. So, and then she says, I have the best prison anybody could want, something like that. So that's the foil that Leonie can compare herself against. She chose not to go that route. You know, who knows who she might have met, but she was at Bryn Mawr, so she was very eligible for a society wife and to be a society wife, and she didn't go that route. But there's always that reference point that's where Leonie might have ended up had she been more conventional, but it just was not her. And so, I think we can't point to too much causation of what made her who she was, but we have a clear sense of who she was. And that's quite an accomplishment to form that kind of relationship with an actor and a character in a film. Jeffrey, you haven't said anything tonight. You don't have to.
I've been thinking that in a way, to me, if we're going to rename the title, I would think creativity would be the title, because I think in many ways their love for each other was an intellectual kind of love for each other. His words spoke so deeply to her, and sometimes the intellectuals are cold. I mean, they're dealing with warmth in their product, but as human beings, they can be cold.
And self-involved. And self-involved.
And self-involved. And I think, when she saw the drawing of the son, that was the catalyst. Then she realized who this child was. That's when she saw it. And then then her creativity allowed him to be the creative person he became.
So she was like editing his life,
Yeah.
That's a good parallel I didn't think of it that way before. Roz, do you want to add anything? Good to see you. Roz Rabo, you want to add something? No. Okay. You're muted if you want to say something. Roz, you're muted.
I thoroughly enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
I thought it was just a wonderful choice. And it's a true story.
Yeah, his mother's story. It's his mother's story. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was wonderful, the actress.
Somebody I wrote to said, "Oh, I have a Noguchi table, a coffee table, very famous."
Pardon me?
Somebody in our group, I send out like 90 emails to people because the synagogue can't figure out how to just send one to us.
Oh my gosh, you're breaking up. There's something wrong with this computer.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim. That's
somebody who's on my email list for this group wrote back to me and said, "I have a Noguchi table." And they're quite valuable now. But, it was typical 50s modernism, like the Eames people, or it wasn't cold. It was like warm modernism. It wasn't the cold, skyscraper modernism that is often referred to.
I grew up with one we had in our house.
A Noguchi table? Yeah. And Noguchi Studio, by the way, was just across the East River in Astoria, and the Noguchi Museum is there. I've not been, but my wife's family often went there. They didn't have a table though. So it's interesting the way, we had some very mixed comments about this, but, we're all right. And I think it's just was a really interesting, sensitive, beautiful film. Arlene Worchel, did you want to add anything? You're muted. Unmute yourself.
I said I enjoyed the film, but I don't have any additional.
Okay. All right, you're allowed.
Okay.
If nobody else wants to say anything, we're coming into election season and the high holidays as well. We can do two discussions in the month of October. And I think, given the election, I want to do Primary Colors, the Mike Nichols movie about the morality of election promotion and how dirty can you get if you're a campaign strategist. It's a wonderful film. Kathy Bates is in it, and it's just so that'll be one of our films. See it if you want. Primary Colors. It's on Amazon. And then I'll keep looking for these smaller films that we seem to enjoy, along with the blockbusters, the intellectual blockbusters that are accessible. Does anybody have anything else they want to add? Any ideas? Anything? Any films you've seen lately? We're coming into prime movie season. You know, the holidays.
We just,
I
just saw,
thought you had chosen this film because it did show a strong woman.
A strong woman, but it's not.
You do have a female candidate.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
But it's sort of
okay.
prime
Well,
to pop.
that's,
I just saw My Old Ass in the theaters. I loved it.
okay, I'll have to see it then. You were right about this one.
I thought it's less artsy, but it's still, I think it was well done. And it was, I think there's plenty to talk about.
Okay, was that at the Laemmle? Did you see it at the Laemmle?
No, I didn't. I saw it at the AMC.
Huh.
It was just playing there and in Burbank, I think.
Mhm.
And it was very good.
And you know, remember the director or who was in it?
Not people I knew.
Yeah, okay. Is it
My
in
old
English?
what?
My Old Ass.
Yes.
You know, like your
Audrey
butt.
Plaza.
Your butt.
Audrey Plaza.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a couple good films. There's one called My Three Daughters about a dying man.
Also really good.
Yeah, that's I think an Israeli director. It was
Really
highly
good.
recommended to me. And that's not available yet, but it's about to come out.
I just saw it, I think I saw it on either Amazon or Netflix.
Really? Already? I looked and I couldn't find it.
Well, maybe they just had a brief showing of it.
Maybe,
But
maybe.
that's where I watched it.
Or maybe it was longer ago. David, did you have an
Well, yeah, I was debating whether it was a good question to ask. I saw the ad also for My Old Ass, and I was wondering, is it kind of, well, is it like Peggy Sue Got Married?
No.
Is it? Oh, it
Oh,
isn't. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
fine. Then,
Oh, I'm sorry. You're asking if it's a time travel thing?
well, Peggy Sue Got Married. It
No,
was
that
kind.
was a light movie. This is not a light. This
Oh,
is,
okay.
but it does have some fantastic part of it. I can just summarize, without giving it away. It is about a young girl who is coming of age, and she meets her 36-year-old self,
Wow.
right.
who tries to give her advice about life. And it is an interesting portrayal of young people today, which they don't look like young people that I grew up with. And that's quite interesting. And just the acting is lovely. It's really quite lovely. And the message has a sweetness and something to talk about personally, what do we expect out of life. It was good.
All right, I'll make sure I
Thank
see
you.
it. And then we'll keep going. There's still a number of films that aren't online yet, but I'm glad that we can see Primary Colors before the election, because that's it's about the morality of elections and how dirty can you get smearing your opponent.
It's
And
a Bill Clinton
For
story.
Primary Colors?
what?
Do you have a date for Primary Colors?
The date, let me look at my calendar. It will be I didn't write it down, but let's see. If today is the 26th, then it's probably the 10th and the 24th of October.
Which one?
I don't know
Which-
yet.
Oh, okay,
I'll keep you in suspense.
okay.
But one of those dates will be Primary Colors. And I don't know, it's like I've been kind of busy and I'm protective of you people. I don't want to program something you're not going to like. You don't have to love it, but you got to get your teeth into it to make this a worthwhile experience. So I don't like to I want to make sure it's a good, well-made, solid film that has uh has a chance of pleasing you all and engaging you. Your curiosity and give us things to talk about. Um, I can't pull up my list now, but so that's where we are. You'll hear from me again in about 10 days. And we'll do this again. And I'm glad you all liked it. And I'll see you soon. Okay. Now you can go party for the rest of the night.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know I've said it before, but you seem to find these terrific films that had you not recommended them, I don't think,
Well,
I would have found them. So I did want to thank you for that.
well, I'm so
Agreed. Thank you,
that's
Jim.
why I do it. That's the fun of it for me is, sharing films that I get, that I'm fond of. There's one very early Warren Beatty film you may enjoy in black and white, directed by Arthur Penn, um, where he plays a nightclub comedian on the run from the mob.
Wow.
And
What
it's
film
about,
is that?
it's called Mickey One,
Oh, Mickey.
Mickey One.
Mm.
And it's a terrific film. It's a restored version playing on Amazon, I think. I was kind of hesitant because it's black and white, it's older, it's very, I forget when it was made. Maybe it was made in the late 60s.
Bring on the black and white.
Yeah, it's gorgeous photography. And it's about paranoia and how you can never be sure of anything. So you have to live with insecurity if you're going to really live your life. And it's about how he's on the run from the mob, and then he says, "No, I'm not running anymore." I didn't give it all away because it's a matter of uh, how he comes to that conclusion. Um, and I think it's a terrific film, one of Arthur Penn's best. I just watched Little Big Man again, and it's okay, but Little Big Man is really a comedy. It's not really a cultural embrace of our unfairness to Indians, even though there's plenty of that in it. Uh, it's I don't know, it just wasn't substantial, and Dustin Hoffman's great. It's nice to see a young Dustin Hoffman, but not every filmmaker hits a home run every time they step up to the plate. And but that's one way I find these things. I look for unknown films that well-known directors have made or the teams have made together. I just watched almost all of Stephen Frears' movies, and I forget which one we just saw. Oh, The Lost King, and I think we saw one other. And so I saw 8 films of this one director, and get 1 or 2 out of that. And that's how I do it. It's one search suggests another. I look at the crew lists, who shot it, who wrote it, who did the music, and I research their careers and I find stuff I've forgotten about or never seen. So it's kind of fun. It's a treasure hunt, and as long as I don't feel too overwhelmed with the time I have to spend to get it, it's fun. It's fun for me. But that's my process. And it's not really guided by any one genre. And you can do it too. I mean, I'm open to your suggestions. Fern, I have to thank you for goading me into seeing Leonie. It was absolutely right to program.
Thank you, Bert.
And not the first
Jim,
time you
would there
steered me
be
right.
any value in, just out of curiosity, taking a single great director and looking at a couple of their films to see thematic things? Or
I don't know if people have the appetite for that because that takes a certain amount of discipline. And I think the novelty of each week being different is what pleases people here. I thought of it, like doing a retrospective. We could do David Mamet or Sidney Lumet, who has very moralistic films, very Jewish, from 12 Angry Men to Prince of the City and a couple others. Very moral streak. David Mamet has a moral streak, even though he's gone off into crazy land lately. Um, uh, Thank you, Mitch. You know, it's like, woo, this guy is, he's no longer representing me. But Glenn Ross is a terrific film. It was a play that was made into a film, and I forget who directed it. But there's Jack Lemmon and all kinds of really great actors from the 60s and 70s in it. And but it's this intense real estate drama about swindlers, you know. Yeah, Mitch.
I just wanted to say how much I enjoy always Emily Mortimer's work.
Yeah.
He has such a beautiful style of acting that always seems so soft, and then she'll change so quickly.
Right.
It's just a wonderful way that she displays her character.
Yeah.
Also,
let me add to that, Mitch, without words too. She's like Meryl Streep. She can just feel something and you see the change on her face. And it's a wonderful articulation. Like you cited the scene where he says, I want to kiss you again. And you see her deciding in that moment, you know, weighing all the options she has. And then she turns her back, you know, and she leaves. Yeah. But it's like that moment is really her process. So you were going to say something else, Mitch?
Yeah, we just got back from New York and we had the treat of watching Mia Farrow in Roommate, and it was excellent. If anybody's heading to New York.
Yeah, no, it's getting great notices. It's hard to get to New York though sometimes. Okay, so as always, this was fun. Thank you for participating, and we'll hear from you soon. Take care, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Shana Tova.
Bye. Anna Tova.